Photography is something that I'm deeply passionate about, and today I want to show you how you can leverage photography terms to enhance your AI images. Prompting for a type of photography can influence the overall image. Anything from the clothing, the location, environment, the overall vibe, and it also helps to give your image some context to help steer the final image. Now obviously there's a long list of different types of photography. We're only going to cover a few today. Eventually they'll be in our prompt guidebook. I'll leave a link in the description below. By the way, all the images you see today is using the photo realism filter, and the prompts I'm using are pretty simple. If we look at the street photography image, you see it's got a little bit of edge. He's in an alleyway, there's graffiti on the wall. This was simply stating street photography of a man in an alley, so on and so forth. Studio photography will give you a classic plain background, pretty even lighting around the face, typical chest up portrait shot. And if I were to prompt for fashion photography without really even stating specifics, you will often get some stylistic hair, some fashionable clothes, great lighting, simply by stating fashion photography. If I were to do sports photography, I often add poster to give me certain effects like the smoke in the background, very dramatic lighting. If I want something kind of weird and quirky, I'll use conceptual photography. In this example, we've got a woman riding a fish that's flying apparently in the air. And for those of you that like to dive into the realm of fictional characters, fantasy photography also enables you to create lifelike images of these characters. By stating the type of photography, you're giving a better indication of the image that you want. Now, there are a lot of benefits to doing this. For example, if you state for food photography, you'll notice the lighting is perfect. You see the glimmer here on the cheese and the bun. It's evenly lit. The details are very clear. And prompting for this was just food photography, hamburger in a rustic restaurant. I didn't have to prompt for anything else. Macro photography will automatically give you an extreme close-up of your subject. And one of my favorite topics, wildlife photography, whether you're doing tigers, lions, or bears. Oh my. Now, while there are a lot of types of photography, there are also certain styles that tend to bleed into photography types. But these are terms that can give you either lifelike images or more hyper-realistic images, depending on what it is you want. And if you know me by now, these three are my favorite styles to use: analog, black and white, and Polaroid. Analog here tends to mimic film photography. Black and white is pretty self-explanatory, but it's a look that I absolutely love. And of course, there's Polaroid. It often gives you a bluish hue, almost cinematic-like. Cinematic photography is known for its dramatic lighting. You can see in the very dark shadows here. We're going to talk more about lighting in a few minutes. There's also long exposure, where many photographers like to take pictures of car trails at night or silky smooth waterfalls. With sepia, you have this monochromatic type of look that's almost brownish in color, but a very popular style. And these styles are just a bit more creative. Infrared photography typically needs a type of filter on the lens. Basically what happens here is that in daytime and night, certain colors react differently. In the real world, these leaves are green, the ground is brown, but you see that the colors are kind of a pinkish color and a blue hue here. For star trails, this is a form of long exposure. I was actually pleasantly surprised that this model could understand star trails, because you can do some very creative patterns with it. This is definitely a fun one. And one of my other favorites to use is double exposure, where you can blend two images together in a sense by prompting. Now, when it comes to lighting, this is probably the most important part I really want you to pay attention to. In many ways, photography is about manipulating light, and how photographers do that is through their camera settings and the lenses they use. Lighting is what gives the image depth, and it can create a mood and atmosphere of the scene. Understanding light and how it applies to different types of photography can really unlock the creativity in your images. Now while we go through these lighting examples, I want you to pay attention to the shadows. This is going to help you understand how certain words affect the image. I wanted to start with these three examples: dramatic, cinematic, and back rim lighting. These are often types of harsh lighting. For example, if we look at dramatic, we see the deep shadows on one side of the face while the other side is lit. We see a similar effect with cinematic, where we have a little bit of side rim lighting here. This side of the face is slightly darker. And with backlighting or rim lighting, you'll often see a glow around the person's head and the outline of their body because the lighting source is coming from behind them. So although we're using different types of words, depending on the context, you might want to use one or the other, or even combine them in many cases. For example, if we look at dramatic lighting, we also see a little bit of rim lighting. Traditionally, cinematic lighting, especially in movies, more of the shadows to be more dominant. The highlighted area of the face is very minimal. This is a very common lighting technique in cinema. These three examples are different types of studio lighting. In this first example, I wanted pretty straightforward front lighting that's not too harsh on the shadows here on the side, kind of even lighting at the front. But the problem is, if you prompt for just front lighting, you'll often get a variety of front lighting types. So when you indicate flash strobe, you're now referencing the actual equipment to get this type of effect. And the results are often even lighting. With high key lighting, it's almost washed out, very bright, often used for fashion that has a white background, and it's almost as if the image is overexposed, but that is done purposefully. When you indicate studio lighting, this is the traditional type of lighting. The majority of the face is often lit more on one side, and very much like dramatic lighting, the other side is heavily shadowed. But if you look closely, there's a little bit of a triangle here. This is known as Rembrandt lighting, and that's achieved with one light on about a 45-degree angle of the subject. So you could imagine if you were to put another light on this side would look more like this. Now the reason why I bring this up is because if you prompt for Rembrandt lighting, you're actually going to get Rembrandt style portrait art. Now in terms of creative lighting, there are many ways to achieve this. One of my favorite things to do is black lighting, otherwise known as ultraviolet. And if you prompt for glowing face paint as an example, you'll get this type of result. I'm sure many of you have been in a dance club and certain parts of your clothing glow. That's sort of the effect here that we're going after. Natural lighting is the most popular and used type of lighting, and some people don't even actually know they're doing that. And this can range in many different ways, from window lighting if you're indoor, simply going outside at a time of day where the lighting is great. And another way to do colorful lighting is using neon lighting in your prompts. This also tends to have a cinematic feel. If you look at the highlighted area here, sort of like a rim light, and this side of the face is lit in blue, although the shadows are not as harsh. Now, a little pop quiz for those of you who are paying attention. Let me know in the comments what you think the type of photography and lighting I used in this image. Now, make sure to stick around for part 2 that is coming soon, where I put all this together to create amazing AI images. Until that next video, my friends, this is Playground.